The paper slid across the diner counter and stopped inches from the trash bin. Grease, coffee rings, and tired fingerprints marked it like a quiet confession. If the waitress had taken one more step, it would have been gone forever. Instead, she glanced down. Everything changed. The name at the top read Ethan Walker. Outside, rain tapped the windows of a roadside diner just off Route 9 in upstate New York. Morning traffic hummed by, drivers rushing toward lives that felt bigger than this place. Inside, the air smelled of bacon and burnt toast, and the radio played an old rock song nobody really listened to. Ethan had chosen this diner because it was cheap, warm, and anonymous. He needed all three. Ethan sat alone in a corner booth, his jacket draped over the seat beside him. He stirred black coffee he didn't enjoy, staring at a resume he'd already memorized. The words looked smaller today, like they were shrinking away from hope. Bachelor's degree, internship experience, hardworking, reliable, willing to learn. It all sounded fine. It just hadn't been enough yet. He checked his phone. No new emails. No missed calls. Just the quiet reminder of another morning starting the same way. Ethan folded the resume and slid it into his bag. He told himself he was calm, but his chest felt tight. Rent was due in 2 weeks. His savings were thin. Pride kept him from calling friends. He wanted to stand on his own, even if his legs were shaking. He paid with exact change, nodded politely to the waitress, and left. He didn't notice the paper slipping from his bag and landing on the counter. Across the diner, a man in a dark coat stood to leave. His posture was straight, his movements measured. People often glanced at him twice, sensing importance without knowing why. His name was Richard Walker, and he had spent most of his life moving fast-building companies, closing deals, flying between cities that blurred together. Richard didn't stop at diners anymore. But that morning his private jet had been delayed by weather, and something had pulled him off the highway. Nostalgia, maybe? Hunger, or a quiet ache he rarely named. He waited while his driver paid the bill. His eyes drifted across the counter and landed on the folded paper. The name caught him first, Walker. He picked it up without thinking. Then he read the first line. Ethan Walker. Richard's breath paused. He sat back down slowly, like the floor had shifted under him. The noise of the diner faded. He unfolded the resume with care, smoothing the creases with his palm. The education section confirmed it. The address sealed it. This wasn't a coincidence. This was his grandson. The boy who used to laugh too loud. The boy who asked endless questions. The boy he hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. Richard, read every word. The internships listed with quiet pride. The work history that showed effort without glamour. The gaps that spoke of struggle without complaint. There was no mention of family connections. No hint of entitlement. Just a steady request for opportunity. For the first time in a long while, Richard felt something sharp behind his eyes. He folded the paper and looked toward the door Ethan had used moments earlier. Too late. Cancel the flight, Richard said to his driver. His voice was calm, but his hands weren't. I'm staying tonight. The driver hesitated. Sir, the board meeting, it can wait. That night, a private jet touched down quietly at a small regional airport. No press, no announcements. Just a man carrying a paper that felt heavier than gold. Across town, Ethan walked the familiar streets back to his apartment. The rain had slowed to a mist, and neon lights reflected on the pavement. He passed couples holding hands, friends laughing outside a bar, strangers who seemed certain about where they were going. Ethan wasn't certain about much except that he couldn't quit. His apartment was small but clean. Secondhand furniture. A stack of books near the window. A plant he watered too much. He dropped his bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. He thought about his childhood. About summers that felt warmer. About phone calls that stopped coming. About how time can stretch a misunderstanding until it feels permanent. He shook it off. Tomorrow mattered more than yesterday. Across the city, Richard checked into a quiet hotel. He placed the resume carefully on the desk, like it might disappear if he looked away too long. He paced the room, memories rising uninvited. He remembered the last argument. The words said too sharply. The silence that followed. He had believed distance would protect them both. He had been wrong. Money could solve many problems. It couldn't reach back in time. Richard sat by the window, watching headlights move like veins through the city. He had built empires with confidence and control. But tonight, he felt something else: hesitation. What if Ethan didn't want to see him? What if it was already too late? The resume answered for him. It said Ethan was trying, alone. That was enough. Richard asked the concierge for an address. The name on the resume matched. He didn't call ahead. Some conversations shouldn't be scheduled. Later that evening, Ethan reheated leftover pasta and ate standing by the sink. His phone buzzed with a notification: another automated rejection. He didn't open it. He didn't need the words. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan frowned. No one ever visited this late. He checked the peephole and saw a tall man standing still, hands at his sides. He opened the door halfway. "Hi, Ethan," the man said. The voice reached back years. Ethan's breath caught. Richard Walker stood there, older, thinner, his hair silver instead of dark. But his eyes were the same, careful, searching. "I found your resume," Richard said quietly. "I think we should talk." Ethan didn't move. 1,000 thoughts rushed forward, but none came out clean. "You weren't supposed to find me," Ethan finally said. "I know," Richard replied, "but I did." Silence filled the hallway. The air felt heavy, but not angry. Just full. Ethan stepped aside. Inside, the apartment told its story without words. No luxury, no chaos. Just effort. Richard took it in every detail, landing softly but deeply. They sat across from each other. The years between them pressed close. "I didn't come to offer you a job," Richard said first. "Or money." Ethan's shoulders loosened a fraction. "I came because I realized I missed more than time," Richard continued. "I missed you." The words hung there. Simple, late, honest. Ethan looked down at his hands. "I didn't want your money," he said. "I wanted to matter." Richard nodded. "You always did." They talked not fast, not slow. About mistakes. About silence. About how pride can sound like strength while it quietly breaks things. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, something shifted. When Richard stood to leave, he paused at the door. "I'm staying in town," he said. "If you want. We can talk again." Ethan didn't answer right away, but he didn't close the door either. As Richard walked down the hallway, the resume remained on the table behind him. No longer just a piece of paper, but the start of something unfinished. And for the first time in years, both men felt the same thing. Oh. Ethan froze before the knock at his apartment door. It was late, the kind of late where the city hums quietly, and the world outside feels like it belongs to everyone but you. He wasn't expecting anyone, and yet there it was, again three firm, deliberate knocks that echoed through his small apartment. His heart skipped. Normally, he would have ignored it or peeked through the peephole and walked away. But something made him pause. A quiet instinct, and he walked toward the door. When he opened it, he almost didn't recognize the man standing there. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a tailored coat, hands calm at his sides, and eyes that seemed to know too much about him. Ethan's heart hit his chest. Grandpa. The word felt strange on his tongue, unfamiliar, yet loaded with a decade of unspoken memories. Richard Walker smiled softly. It's a kind of smile that felt like it carried 100 apologies and 100 mischances all at once. "Hi, Ethan," Richard said, his voice low, gentle, deliberate. "It's me. I know this is unexpected." Ethan stepped aside, letting him in, his mind racing faster than his heart. The apartment was modest, small but neat. Books stacked unevenly by the couch, a plant by the window. Old furniture with scratches and stories etched into every corner. Richard took it all in silently, letting the room tell him what money could never buy: hard work, independence, a quiet pride, and a life lived on one's own terms. Richard sat in the chair Ethan offered, careful not to take up too much space, like a guest unsure if he belonged there. Ethan remained standing for a moment, fidgeting with his hands. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of years of distance, of the tension between what was said and what was left unsaid. "I read your resume," Richard finally said, his eyes meeting Ethan's. There was no judgment in his tone, only recognition. "You didn't send it to me, yet here it is. I think it tells me a lot more than you realize." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It wasn't meant for you," he said. Pride, stubbornness, and years of guarded independence came through in his voice. "I know," Richard replied calmly. "But it mattered that I found it." Kay paused, collecting his thoughts. "You've been trying alone. And that I needed to see." The words struck deeper than Ethan expected. Kilone. Trying. For years, he had faced rejections, empty inboxes, and quiet despair without ever asking for help. He had wanted his grandfather to care, not the money, not the connections, but genuine attention. And now, standing before him, Richard's presence was proof that he hadn't been forgotten. Richard leaned back slightly, a subtle sigh escaping him. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "I thought distance was protecting you. I thought silence was okay. But I was wrong. I should have been there." Ethan's voice softened, his shoulders finally losing some of the tension they had held for so long. "I didn't want your money," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I wanted you to care." Richard nodded, a shadow of regret crossing his face. "I've spent decades chasing success," he said, almost bitterly. "I've built companies, hotels, everything you can name. But none of it felt real without family. None of it mattered the way it should have. And that's on me. I lost time I can't get back." The words hung between them. Neither knew exactly how to bridge the decade-long gap, but both felt the walls around their hearts soften. For years, pride and misunderstanding had kept them apart. Now, recognition and remorse were beginning to close that distance. "I'm not here to fix your life," Richard said after a pause. "I'm not here to hand you a job or a check. I'm here to reconnect, to be present, to let you know you don't have to face everything alone." Ethan looked down at his hands, gripping the edge of the table. Tears threatened, but he didn't let them fall. Instead, he let the words settle in him. For the first time in years, he felt like someone genuinely believed in him, not because of his achievements, but because of who he was. They talked for hours, not in a formal way, not about money or inheritance or business deals. They talked about memories, summers in the park, lessons learned in small ways, the quiet moments that had gone unappreciated. They talked about mistakes, misunderstandings, and the silent burdens carried alone. They laughed softly at the absurdity of grown men holding on to old pride. And they cried quietly for the years lost to distance. The night stretched long, filled with confessions and reconciliations. Richard admitted his fear of failure had kept him distant even from his own grandson. Ethan admitted that stubborn independence had kept him from reaching out. Both recognized how much time had been wasted, yet neither felt regret that was paralyzing. Instead, there was possibility. A fragile, beautiful chance to rebuild what had been broken. When the conversation slowed, Richard stood near the door, hesitating. Ethan remained seated, unsure if he should speak first or stay silent. Richard's voice broke the quiet. "I'm staying in town," he said gently. "If you're willing, we can take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just presence." Ethan nodded slowly, swallowing hard. He wanted to speak, to ask if this could really be real, but words failed him. Instead, he simply nodded, allowing the moment to exist as it was, tentative, delicate, and full of potential. The next morning, Ethan found himself back at the diner. The smell of coffee and toast filled the air, comforting and familiar. He ordered black coffee, stirring it slowly, letting the warmth seep in. He thought about the night before, the unexpected arrival of his grandfather, and the quiet conversations that had finally begun to bridge years of distance. As he sipped, he noticed a woman at the counter. Claire. She was a regular, someone who had smiled at him in passing, a gentle presence he had ignored for months. Today, their eyes met, and she smiled warmly. It was a simple moment, a spark of connection that felt significant. He returned her smile, a small but meaningful acknowledgement. Ethan left the diner with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. The world outside hadn't changed. The streets were the same. The traffic still moved fast. But everything within him shifted. Hope was no longer just a word. It was real, tangible, and possible. Across town, Richard looked out from his hotel window at the city below. The skyline shimmered in the early morning light. For decades, he had measured his life in deals, profits, and successes. But standing in that apartment, watching his grandson navigate life with dignity and resilience, he realized the true measure of life wasn't wealth. It was connection, family, love. He picked up his phone and drafted a simple message to Ethan. "Take all the time you need. I'm here, always." And he sent it, knowing that for once his wealth couldn't buy happiness, but presence and love could. Ethan returned home, feeling the quiet hum of possibility. He walked into his apartment, placed his bag down, and stared at the resume that had started it all. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a bridge. A reminder that life could shift in an instant. That hope could arrive on a quiet night, carried on the wings of a single action, a single decision, a single presence. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel alone. And somewhere in the city, Richard Walker felt the same way. Realizing that success was meaningless without the people who mattered. That night had been the start not of a perfect life, but of a life finally worth living together. Ethan smiled, thinking about the night ahead, the conversations yet to come, and the bond finally forming after years of distance. The city outside moved fast, but inside, their hearts had slowed just enough to reconnect. It wasn't just about family. It was about forgiveness, understanding, and the quiet, profound power of being present for someone you love. And as the morning sun streamed through the apartment window, it illuminated not just the room, but the start of a new chapter, one where love, patience, and second chances could flourish. Ethan placed the resume back on the table, not as a reminder of struggle, but as proof that life had a way of delivering unexpected hope in the most ordinary places. For both of them, it wasn't just a reunion. It was a promise, a chance to rebuild what had been lost and to write the future together. One honest, open, hopeful day at a time. The world outside was still busy and loud. But in that apartment, in that quiet reconnection, they finally understood that the most powerful things in life weren't bought or earned, they were felt, shared, and nurtured with the people who mattered most.